I think you've gotten a chance to see a little bit about Florida and its input today. We're now going to transition into the public sector comment, and I was hoping to make some comments on behalf of Escambia County. Kind of, as some people said, with a little bit of history and starting us in the right direction. I don't know, if you go a block south of here, you hit Plaza Ferdinand. Those of you who've never been here, the important part about Plaza Ferdinand is in 1821, that's where Florida became a part of the United States. It was right there when Andrew Jackson took control of Florida and established his first two counties, one of which was Escambia County, Florida. My family, my children are 8th generation Floridians, Escambia County residents. We've been here since almost it was a territory. They've had the opportunity since that time to realize the physical assets that we have and the environmental assets that we have in this community. Seen them since the time they were pristine until I can say, you know, we worked with them. And unfortunately, not always have we done the right thing in Escambia County. I can say that I grew up in the 70s. We still grew up swimming, sailing, doing a lot of those things, but our waters were probably not as good as what they should have been. My point is to come back to, since that time, and I'm especially proud of what we've been able to do in Escambia County since the 1990s, and reinvest in our environmental assets, whether that's buying property and working with DEP to establish a wetlands estuary in Perdido Bay, whether it's Project Green Shores with the city of Pensacola, whether it's just cleaning up things in Bayou Tahar, or dealing with Ms. Fleming and the other parts of EPA, and dealing with some Superfund sites that we've had. We've made tremendous strides in Escambia County over the last 15 years. We realize that our environment is integral to our economic situation. The two go hand in hand. As we look at the questions that are up there, I think the goals of community resilience, habitat, water quality, and living marine resources are certainly the right goals for our environmental restoration. I think that's much of what we're happening here. But again, I think as you heard today, the speakers from the state of Florida, much of the things that deal with it are also economic. If we do not have a strong economic community and resiliency and restoration from the things that we've suffered, whether hurricanes, oil spill, a variety of other things, we can't afford in Escambia County to invest in improving our environment. Again, the two go hand in hand. So as we look at some of the right goals in community resilience, I think it is vitally important that we communicate and look at integrating in the economic recovery as well. I think there was a question earlier from a task force member, what were the three things that are the most important to you? I would say that clearly, I think Secretary of the Navy Mabus put those down. Those were environmental restoration, economic restoration, and human health. Those are the three things that are most essential to all of us, whether we're over on the other side in Texas or in Florida or somewhere in the states in between. I think when I was in New Orleans speaking a while back, I said I drive 190 miles back home and I go through 4 states. One of the things that has been a challenge for us has been the multi-level levels of jurisdiction that we deal with in the Gulf. Yet I think after this oil spill, I've never seen us this close together and working together. What I want to make sure each of you get a chance to really look at, as you look at those questions, is what the local governments did. And we had good participation from each of the states, and I enjoyed serving on that task force. I think one of the things we learned through this oil spill is we certainly appreciate the assets and the resources that the federal government can bring to bear, but it's typically at the local level where the people have the greatest access to their government and to the projects they want to be done. And I think through what we learned in the oil spill was if you don't engage local governments, you will not be successful in implementation. And so I put it out to this task force. I hope you have the chance to look at that. There are a lot of good ideas that came through there. We discussed equitable distribution of these funds across there. What happens in the Western Gulf? It's good for the Eastern Gulf, but it's not going to get the job done for the Eastern Gulf. Likewise, if you do it on the Eastern Gulf, it's not going to do what's needed on the Western Gulf. So we need equitable distribution. I think there's some other things that we need to fund projects and come down to those projects that we're dealing with and actually making sure that this money actually goes into funding those projects and not administrative costs. And you see that's there. If there's anything with barriers, we are looking to immediately get through those. And I know, Brian, you had asked the question on us, some barriers. I would say if you look to the local government, many of these projects have been vetted locally with citizens and the local government officials. So there are a number of projects that are there for each region and each jurisdiction that are already a long way along getting past those regulatory issues. And again, any assistance we can get, that was also came through very clear in the local government plan. Lastly, I know we've got Mr. Robinson from NOAA, as we do some of this research, and this research is essential. I think it is important from a credibility standpoint that research be conducted with institutional research institutions that are in the Gulf of Mexico. Certainly one of the things we dealt with was if it's credible or not, if the information is correct or not, if the public doesn't believe it, then it really moves us nowhere in where we're going. We've got to be able to establish credibility. And some of that during this spill was clearly seen through the local institutions because they live here. They live in the Gulf. They have people that are attached to it and the long-term viability of the Gulf. And I think it's important that those institutions be involved in the research that moves forward because they have the most at stake at it. So these are all some of the comments that came out. They're not just my comments. They're comments that came out of the local government task force. And I ask you to please take the time to research that document. A lot of time and meetings went into there. I know Brian was involved. I know Becky Cook was heavily involved in coordinating those meetings. A lot of time and energy went into those and thought process. So I simply turn that over to y'all. There was representation from every state in there, and I thought we worked well together. Like I said before, despite the fact that we deal with these multi-jurisdictions, this effort has really, for the first time I felt, pulled us together as a region that goes across these jurisdictional and state lines to work together. And I think that was a piece of document that had a lot of good information that really did reach across those state lines. With that, I'd like to, again, open it up to the public comment section and just, again, thank the task force for being here. I hope your visit to Florida and Escambia County and the city of Pensacola has been a good one, and we certainly look forward to, I know you've been here twice now, but we look forward to having you back anytime y'all want to come back here.
Commissioner, thank you.
Thank you.
To ask your few brief comments, City of Pensacola, we have to observe both levels of local government here because they've both been partners in trying to help us be effective here on our restoration status.
And I appreciate that, Madam Administrator and Director. Thank you again for coming here to Pensacola to have an opportunity to expand your horizons as you're thinking about how you restore the Gulf. I'd like to take a little different tack than and my good colleague, the Commissioner, and talk to you about, at least for a moment, from the local government perspective, at the smallest local government as the city. In our case, we're the largest municipality in the Northwest. But part of what I've understood as part of your charge as I've attended your meetings is how to think more broadly about the issues that you need to grapple with. And I think what we can provide you is a perspective of how we view it as Pensacola, but how we think we can do this 5-state connection that I think that you're going to be talking about when you do your final report in October. Some of the things that we think that I'm interested in that you've been involved in currently is, one, not reinventing the wheel, being able to build and leverage some of the best practices that are out there currently. So that's why I'm encouraged to see that you had this conversation with South Florida, particularly with the Everglades restoration that's been brought up, particularly by the folks over in Louisiana when they point to Florida. One of the things that we say is that, how is it that we're going to do something different? That's what the Secretary of the Navy asked us. When the cameras are gone, when we're behind and no one's thinking about us anymore, what's going to be different about how you do business? And what you see here in Florida, the fact that we're a quintessential environmental state, we do start to do things differently. We just start to restore the Kissimmee River. We start to restore the Everglades. And I think one of the things that we can take away from this is how it is that your last question, what would success look like? And I think for me, success will look like that we would be more prosperous. particularly here in Escambia County in Northwest Florida, if we're more prosperous. And I was struck by when the administrator was here in November, her first 25% of her presentation talked about the economy and the economics of the Gulf, the population growth, and then what that was going to mean. One of the things that I think that we can think in terms of, again, as a 5-region area is let's thinking about trade. The new administration is talking about increasing its trade by doubling it in the next 5 years. The state of Florida wants to double trade in the next 5 years. Why couldn't you be an advocate, for example, for the Maritime Highway? I've provided you a document that shows, if you remember when you were in New Orleans, they showed you the truck traffic that came out of their port. It was dramatic, how it was different than, say, New York, and how it was even greater than what you get out of Long Beach and Los Angeles, how it just packed the I-110 corridor. If you're able, for example, to advocate with your sister agencies, the FDOT, to pull forward, for example, M10 of the Marine Highway System, it's a win for the EPA because you're able to start to reduce the emissions because of carbon emissions. You're able to reduce our reliance on foreign oil. You're able to make it more safer if you're transporting hazardous waste material. The FDOT gets a win because you're able to take that truck traffic off of I-10 highway for traffic congestion. You're able to free up the bottlenecks. We had an opportunity to meet with Representative Bonner of Alabama, who's very much interested in that. So I think, again, as part of your economic component, you could start to have conversations about changing the paradigm on how we do business and being able to get us to be able to think in terms of other modalities of transportation, again, to be able to help us think in terms of how we can restore the Gulf. Another opportunity, and I'm going to do my alliteration here, we can think of, for example, tourism. How can that be a multi-state cooperative in order for you to be able to help us think in terms of the Gulf? You have Orlando, which is the Magic City. You have Jacksonville, you have St. Augustine, where, Hank, you spent some time as the debate about the oldest city, but we know here in Pensacola, we're the first settlement, and then you can get across to the Crescent City. Restoring Amtrak. I've been here 3 years, and when I was down in New Orleans, people would come up to you and say, when are we going to get Amtrak restored? It was taken out during the hurricanes. Orlando, you saw here with Mimi Drew, they want to be able to increase they want to be able to increase their tourism. It was hurting here in Florida. 17% increase in Brazilian traffic and tourism down in South Florida. Disney wants to be able to capture some of that. Why couldn't we get them on a transit to be able to take them from Orlando to New Orleans by being able to increase that service? Again, being able to talk with 3 states to make that happen. It creates jobs. It creates manufacturing jobs because we'll have to manufacture those engines and coaches. In the documentation I gave you in 2009, Congress has asked the Amtrak to take a look at the 3 options, and we're supportive of option 3. Again, you can be an advocate for us as to be able to change the paradigm shifts, to be able to talk in terms of economic development for things that we're already strong for. So again, we can be more prosperous. Another area that I think you can take a look at, taking my alliteration another step, is treasure. So we have trade, tourism, treasure. How do you fund these kinds of things? Most folks are still thinking in terms of BP dollars, BP spill money. But I think that there's capital investment that's out there already. Again, using a best practice, the Philadelphia Federal Reserve holds a biannual conference called Rethinking Older Cities. It's focused on the Philadelphia, Eastern Pennsylvania, South Jersey, now down to Delaware area. It's a local focus, but their attendees reaches now national in its scope. They've been able to bring other Federal Reserves to have conversations about how do you create more commerce. And one of the outgrowths over the years has been the entire renovation and revitalization of the Philadelphia Navy shipyards, for example. Ben Bernanke was there at the last meeting to take a tour of how they've taken that development and created it into a green institution. I think there's an opportunity for the Atlanta Federal Reserve to do something similar with the Gulf. I've had a chance to talk with their staff. They're concerned about the fact that their region is large, that they extend to Miami. They've got to be in Jacksonville. They've got to be across to New Orleans. But I think, again, with your advocacy, you could talk with them about how they can take that model that's being currently used in Philadelphia and how they can then talk in terms of coming to the Gulf. We're undercapitalized. We don't have the same kind of level of investment capital in our area that you have in San Francisco or that's now starting to be developed in Southwest Florida. So here would be an opportunity for them to leverage the experience that the Federal Reserve System has currently. Working with them in the Atlanta, we could do a conference here. Suppose we said, reimagine or imagine the Gulf. So if we imagine the Gulf every 2 years, I'd even concede it could be in New Orleans. So you could imagine the Gulf every 2 years to be able to bring capital investment here, because if you had the imprimatur of the Federal Reserve, I think that would get people's attention. Again, that's an opportunity, I think, for your task force to take a look at the capital component for Treasury as to how it is that we can think about it. And then the last thing, again, or a couple more comments, again, from the local perspective as to how we can fit into a larger...
Mr. Cohen, you're welcome to send us this in writing as well. So
I will do that.
We've got a lot of folks that want to speak.
Let me close by leveraging the comment that the Commissioner made about the technology and science being done here locally. We think it would be important to do a Deepwater Oil Research Institute here in the Gulf. We think it would make sense for it to be here in Pensacola, because we could provide, as the Commissioner said, that unbiased look at the data, since we're not tied, I think, to the carbon-based industry. And as you think in terms of where those dollars may go, having established a research institute here, I think would be one of the more important things that you could do for our area. With that, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Well, Brian Griffith is going to be our host today with the microphone. I couldn't think of a politically correct way of describing that, so I just ducked. I did want to mention that there are 2 other events scheduled this afternoon. We have the Environmental Justice Roundtable that was scheduled for 1 o'clock. Lisa Garcia said it. I'm assuming, Lisa, this would follow the listening session at this point. Is that the? Okay. And we also at 2 o'clock have the conservation workshop to talk about land conservation across the Gulf, and we will also have to begin that after the session. So if you're interested in both sessions, you'll need to move back and forth. And I'm going to ask Brian Griffith to conduct the listening session here. Brian, thanks.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. A little bit of adaptation that you've already gone through. We moved rooms, and now we've moved schedules, and certainly biting well into actually now crossing over to the sessions that John just mentioned. So we're going to spend about the next 45 minutes to an hour, if time will allow us to do that, to actually add to in essence, the footing that was gathered here on November the 8th, when this was actually the first meeting and the first public listening sessions that we actually conducted. There were 4 concurrent sessions, and actually the commentary to each one of those sessions is posted on the task force website. I would just offer that much has evolved, which you would certainly hope would be the case, establishing that out of the box, now the gate arrangement with us, for us. And now we've moved ahead, as I mentioned earlier, into really beginning to reach out to the public and try to gain input on the areas of focus and that the task force has recently drawn to. Again, as a backdrop, as announced on May the 6th in Mobile, the thematic focus of the task force is really centered on water quality, restoring habitat, taking on habitat restoration, living coastal and marine resources, and building up the community resilience and capacities. I would say that from this morning's sessions, you heard each and every one of those title lines deeply embedded in both the technical and the operational oratory in the program sessions. We have a lot of people in the audience, never 100% certain how many people would like to talk. We're going to be very respectful, obviously, of those that would. I've got a gentleman in the audience, Jerry, raise your hand, where are you? Right. That's going to be moving around with a mobile microphone. We have 2 microphones, one here and one on the other side of the room, just a little bit easier to try to get the mechanics of this going. So without further ado, I would ask you to really key on these 5 questions up on the screen. Just read them real quickly. Are these the right goals? Hence those 4 that I mentioned earlier. What are the critical actions or major outcomes from your perspective that you see as part of this strategy that you would like to impose your thoughts on the task force for? What new programs or actions, state, federal, and private, are needed? You heard many of those this morning and again just a few moments ago. What key policy changes will improve the processes necessary to support restoration? These are key to us, really getting to have a knowledge at the working level of what the policy impediments are very important to the task force. And then finally, and a very important question, if you're inclined to answer this, is what would success look like in terms of. So what I'll do is I'll take some initial recognition around these microphones, but I don't want to lose anybody. And I do recall just generally who came up to the microphone first, but Sir Keith, I think you go first. Yes, if you would identify yourself, it helps us. We take the notes, and as I pointed out earlier, all of the comments are posted on the internet.
Please do address yourself to the, are you on the first question, Brian?
Yes,
First goal?
well, actually, it's any question they would choose to
All right.
actually apply themselves to.
And be respectful of the other folks that want to speak, because we have a lot of folk in the audience.
Precisely. Yes, sir.
I'm Keith Wilkins. I'm the Director of Escambia County's Community and Environment Department. And to get to those points, you've heard twice now about you have to get the water right. You heard that in Mobile, and you heard it again today. You also heard in Mobile that you have to get the land right. And I think that's the essence of your goals. The task that you guys really have in front of you is sort of Star Trek-ish, to be bold and go where no bureaucracy has gone before, and sort of break the mold and break our past patterns. Are the goals right? They are. They're fine goals. However, I think the overriding goal is in the name of the task force to restore the Gulf ecology. With regards to question number 2, what are the critical actions, major outcomes? I think that what's going to be key is to establish a permanent federal funding source for this. Without permanent funding, all of your work, all of everybody in the audience's work is going to be for naught. Without the money, we won't be able to do anything. No bucks, no Buck Rogers. We need to establish an apolitical prioritization of these projects, and I think establish objectives and a prioritization based on how those projects fit into the overall scheme of restoration of the Gulf of Mexico. And I also believe that the solutions need to be on a regional and partnership basis rather than looking at political jurisdictions, individual states, individual local governments. It needs to go be ecoshed wide and probably the Mississippi River watershed wide. Also, with regards to number 3, new programs and actions. Again, I think that, and this is not going to be popular, but this is where I think the task force will have to be bold in order to get to that point of permanent federal funding. Apolitically, I believe that we need to establish a Gulf of Mexico Restoration Block Grant Program that would provide funding, non-competitive funding, as projects are approved, down to the various agencies and the local governments. I think that there needs to be a Gulf of Mexico wide, or Mississippi, I guess, watershed wide education program so that you can make a rancher in South Dakota realize how he's vested in the Gulf of Mexico.
Okay, so we need to
Okay, I'm sorry.
get to it.
We would rather not impose an arbitrary time limit, but we will if we need to get everybody.
I'm looking at behind you.
Keith,
Success can be measured in acres of oyster bed restoration, acres of seagrass restoration, of course, removal of pollutants. I think also reduced insurance claims, reduced sustained reduction in the size of the hypoxic dead zone, and also in expanding research and funding for universities along the Gulf of Mexico.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you would, I'm going to have you step up to the microphone, and you'll be next after that. I'm going to go across the room here to the young ladies standing at the other. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. For the record, my name is Debbie Harrison. I'm here representing National Parks Conservation Association, and I would like to recommend 3 items which I believe that the task force could utilize in trying to achieve its goals of restoration of the Gulf of Mexico. First, of course, it's going to be a multi-year effort, just as Everglades is. And Everglades is a model that I think we could look at as a highly effective mechanism for including state, local, tribal, and federal participants in finding resolution to developing a sustainable South Florida, both ecologically and economically. There are areas where we have baseline data already available, and fortunately, those areas were spared during the Deepwater Horizon because the loop current at this point has not carried the toxins far enough south to reach the Tortugas Natural Resource Area, which is under the jurisdiction of the Department of Interior, or the Tortugas Ecological Reserve, which is under the jurisdiction of the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary. The project was approved by the Gulf of Mexico Marine Management Council, and baseline data, science and research and monitoring have been going on there for a number of years, which can be highly effective in helping us determine what kind of impacts we're seeing throughout the rest of the Gulf. Estuarine systems, mangrove fringe, both in the Everglades and along the coast of the Gulf of Mexico is a critical component. It's the juvenile nursery area for many of our fish. We need to be paying very close attention to that. I believe that moving forward with the C-43 project in the Everglades will go a long way towards helping both with water quality and appropriate water quantity in the Gulf of Mexico. And finally, a series of small marine protected areas scattered around the Gulf of Mexico in a connective fashion that would allow us to establish a baseline and start determining through research and monitoring and assessment what the impacts of the oil spill are on our fisheries. Undertaken by NOAA in the Gulf of Mexico would certainly be something that would allow us to be able to continue to monitor that process. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, David.
Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the chance to speak here today. My name is Donald Waters. I've been a commercial fisherman in the Gulf of Mexico going on over 40 years now. I've supported the research and continue to support research, and I am happy to see that with Mr. Mikołowski's presentation today of the research that he's doing. I think we have Mr. Guy's support, and we've had Mr. Wiley contributing support. I just want this task force to be flexible enough and really look, because in the Gulf of Mexico, in our fisheries today, we have more questions than we have answers. And I want this task force to be ready to tackle anything that we see that may threaten what we have in our fisheries today. I don't want to blow anything out of proportion. We have many, many questions and very few answers. I would deeply appreciate the seriousness and the research to take to find the answers to the questions of what's actually going on. Even though we're living in Florida, the fish basically move from west to east. So a lot of the adult fish that we catch off of our Florida coast is born in Louisiana River estuaries. So those estuaries are extremely important to our state of Florida. And I appreciate the support, and I hope we move forward with answering some of the questions that we have in our seafood industry. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Step up. I'll take the young lady across the hall. Yes.
Thank you. For the record, my name is Christy Scally. I'm the director of the E.O. Wilson Biophilia Center, located in Freeport, Florida. I'd like to start off with a quote by Baba Dione that says, "In the end, we will conserve only what we love. We will only love what we understand. We will only understand what we have been taught." With this in mind, you can see that restoration begins with education. And that is my mission here. I want to thank you all for this opportunity. And obviously, you all would be serving on this board if someone hasn't reached and touched your lives at some point and helped educate you about the environment. The E.O. Wilson Biophilia Center is an environmental education center that works with 6 county school districts. We work with all the students in Walton County, all the students in Bay County. We have a number of schools in Okaloosa. We have all schools in Washington. We also serve schools in Holmes and Leon County. We have curriculum written in line with the Sunshine State Standards that is written for 4th grade and 7th grade with a strong STEM focus: science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Our goal is to inspire these students to learn about the environment and help conserve it and restore it. We have actually included a lesson this year about the oil spill recovery lesson. And the students just come alive, it becomes real world and applicable. We must invest in this next generation to find sustainable solutions. And my question to you here is addressed to question number 3. What new programs and actions, state, federal, and private, are needed? And so I'm asking you, if, as a board, please consider educating the next generation, and in whatever courses of action monies are spent, please allocate funds to educate this next generation so that they can find sustainable solutions. These students will be the ones who will be dealing with the long-term ramifications of the oil spill. We're also working with the Panhandle Area Education Consortium located at Chipley. They have their own TV channel, Florida Education Channel, FEC TV, that reaches 13 million homes around the nation, and they do teacher training and service hours. We're working collaboratively. We're trying to see if there's a way that we can get funding to film our programs so that we can distribute those nationwide. Specifically, we'd like to have a program where we have scientists come to our center, speak about the oil spill, work with teachers, develop curriculum. This material can be filmed and distributed to all the states along the Gulf Coast so that these students can implement this information for the next generation. I believe that's all I have, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the panel and the task force for coming here today and on the second meeting. I want to reiterate, I'm George Hawthorne. I'm the chairman of the Gulf Coast African American Chamber of Commerce. I'm also the CEO of Diversity Program Advisors, a local diversity inclusion program management and development company. I'm going to speak to the same issues that I spoke to in the November meeting, and relative specifically to what key policy changes will improve the processes necessary to support restoration. One of the key areas that I like to see is that, and I addressed it last time, is to make sure that there is a written statement of diversity inclusion for the procurement processes of the contractors and the areas of restoration. I mean, the minority communities have been very hurt in a just as bad or worse than the general population, and we need economic stimulus. So I think that by tying the economic and the environmental restoration together, that we get a 2-for-1 benefit. The other, second and last issue I'd like to speak about is the issue relative to the situation like the city of Pensacola is in. How, in fact, that when mitigation projects, wetland inclusion, wetland buildup, breakwater buildup to save coastlines, how in fact can these municipal governments be reimbursed? Because since the oil spill, the city of Pensacola is in right now in about a $2.8 million restoration of wetlands and the building of a breakwater. And you know, I think that the city government should not be penalized for being proactive in their mitigation of their environmental issues. And so I think that what I will request is in the policy and in the programs that there's some retroactive statement or ability for governments, the municipalities, to recoup some of the funds that have been invested during this period of evaluation or this study or this task force period. This has been going on for more than a year now. Your program will not be finished for another 3, 6 months, 8 months before it's actually been enacted in legislation. We'd like to see if in fact there could be some retroactive language put in there so that governments are not harmed by being proactive in their investments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brian, I'd just like to make one quick announcement for, we had, of course, thought we'd be concluded. Some of our members had planned their travel schedule, so if you see folks leave, it's not that they're not interested, but they thought they would be done. But I will be here as long as there's folks wanting to talk, and as will Brian and those that can. But a few of the folks that need to get out will have to slip out as their schedules. They thought they were. I'd promised them they'd be done by 12:30, so we're going to lose some folks. So.
Thank you, John. I'm going to move over here and then come back. Yes, ma'am. Young lady over here.
Lori McDonald. I'm the Florida Director for Defenders of Wildlife. I want to address what success will look like and measurable goals. Success will largely be based on looking at the abundance and diversity and range of the native species of the Gulf. And we would hope that special attention would be given to those imperiled species that are currently listed or are at risk. The measurable goals should be looking at individual species and also as members of whole communities, and whether that's from the largest kind of megafauna like whales that are in the Gulf and using habitat at depth, to the more diminutive seahorses that are at the surface in sargassum mats. Perhaps even looking at sea turtles, not only in their own right, but as umbrella and indicator species that use nesting beaches, that use seagrass beds for foraging, that are at sea, again in sargassum mats and at sea during their movement and resting periods. We would hope that there would be well thought out plans, of course, with measurable goals, but that the implementation of these plans would be well monitored and would be adapted and flexible as time goes by in order to be sure that they're actually working. I would also like to point out that Defenders of Wildlife, in partnership with the National Wildlife Refuge Association, has produced a report that identifies important areas along our coastlines throughout the Gulf that would be important for acquisition or conservation easements. And that report has the acreages, the probable cost of these areas, ownerships, and so forth. So I look forward to transferring that to you and to seeing success in the form of a very well thought out plan with monitoring, implementation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Laura. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Lisa Beaver with the Charlotte Harbor National Estuary Program, and I have with me
Mark Alderson, Sarasota Bay Estuary Program Director.
And I wanted to say that the National Estuary Programs are an outstanding mechanism for implementing regional restoration for watersheds and estuaries. There are 7 NEPs across the Gulf Coast, and 3 of the National Estuary Programs are in Southwest Florida. We represent, and that includes Tampa Bay, Sarasota Bay, and Charlotte Harbor. The National Estuary Program was created under Section 320 of the Clean Water Act, and each is designated an estuary of national significance. We all implement our comprehensive conservation management plans through public outreach, research, policy development, and restoration, water quality, hydrology, and habitat restoration. We have the plans in place, including an inventory of shovel-ready and near shovel-ready restoration projects to address water quality, hydrology, and habitat. And we have a substantial track record for implementing successful restoration projects.
In Sarasota Bay, for example, we've reduced nitrogen pollution by 64%. By 2016, we will have no wastewater discharge into Sarasota Bay. Our seagrass levels are 25% above 1950 levels. Just a remarkable accomplishment. So this all can be done. It takes time, it takes energy, and we're hopeful that you can work with the National Estuary Programs to help the Gulf be restored. We have a letter that we put together. It's a partnership letter. It's a proposal to foster this relationship among the NEPs, to work with us to help make this happen. So we thank you for your possible support in this activity. Thank you.
Thank you both.
Yeah, we appreciate the support of the NEPs. They've been very effective in not only the Gulf but around the country.
Yes, if you'll step up, I'll take the young lady across here.
Good afternoon. I'm Julie Wraithnell, the Director of Wildlife Conservation for Audubon of Florida, the State Office of National Audubon Society. I just wanted to address a few of these questions. As you already heard from Executive Director Nick Wiley, many of the impacts to our coastal wildlife, and particularly birds, came as a result of response efforts to the spill, not just the arrival of oil product on our beaches. And none of that was intentional. The great majority of that was well-intentioned but uncoordinated response efforts working at odds with one another. And I think that there's a tremendous lesson to be learned in that for our ongoing restoration efforts. Given all of the emphasis that we're placing on getting money quickly and getting projects on the ground quickly, we need to be sure that we are not sacrificing that coordination. We need to be sure that we're creating a context and a framework to ensure that these restoration projects don't work at odds with each other or at odds with existing conservation activities that are already ongoing in these areas. Similarly, with regard to what new programs and actions are needed, I'm not sure if it falls under this or under the right goals, but I just wanted to emphasize the necessary dynamism of our coastal habitats. A lot of people forget the fact that the wildlife that depend on our beaches and barrier islands are ecological anarchists. They like nothing better than washovers and blowouts, and every time that we stabilize habitats, that we plant monocultures of sea oats, and undertake dramatic engineering projects, we are doing them a disservice. So I would hope that the group would actually put coastal dynamism as a goal into the desired outcomes that they see for this work. Similarly, key policy changes, I would just remind everyone that, of course, all states are not created equal in the way that they treat their coastal habitats and their coastal growth, and similarly, no state is constant in the way that they handle their coastal development either. We've seen some dramatic changes in Florida recently, and I would just encourage the group to condition the awards that you make on projects with specific requirements for how those areas are to be shepherded in the future to ensure that local conditions don't undermine the efforts of this good group. And finally, what would success look like? I simply wanted to underscore the very good point that Shannon Estenos made before you today about ecological indicators and the way that that's been used in Everglades restoration. It is a very tangible, buck stops here way of making sure that we keep our eye on the prize and we stay the course. I think we all recognize this is not a wind sprint, this is a marathon. And that helps us stay on course. The other advantage to it that she didn't underscore is that it provides a focal point for the public. It's an entry point for the public into this broader, complex restoration effort. And by putting a face on the restoration effort, it will help us sustain public support for that marathon rather than just for the short term. Thank you so much for all of you for your service.
Thank you, Julie.
Yes, ma'am.
My name is Bobby Walker. I'm the Executive Director for the National Association of Charter Boat Operators. We're a nonprofit organization that represents over 3,400 small businesses. We are the voice for our industry. The United States needs a vibrant Gulf Coast. The Gulf Coast needs help restoring healthy ecosystems and support for our small businesses. Please don't forget we the people, the small businesses struggling to survive in an uncertain future. Healthy fish stocks are our business. Until we can prove beyond a doubt fish are safe to eat, we will continue to lose these vital small businesses. I'm going to ask three things of you. Please enhance our community resilience by developing and funding fishery cooperative research and monitoring programs using charter and commercial boats. 2, fund annual fishery stock assessments. And 3, increase our vital habitat with artificial reefs. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. That's great. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you sitting back there. Give me just a second. I'll go over here. Yes.
Hi, I'm Misty, and I do run a nonprofit, but there's a lot of non in the profit, so I'm basically just a volunteer. Since the April 20th oil crime, I have spent a little over a year doing a lot of what you guys are talking about. The woman that talked about the curriculum in the schools. I've developed a music ecology curriculum. I've gone in schools in Florida and worked with kids who are quite eager for this information. I've personally replanted marshes in Louisiana. I have attended countless oyster reef legislative meetings in Alabama. I have cleaned the beaches in all 4 affected states personally. And I've listened carefully to all of these presentations, and I've heard an awful lot about money and success measured by economic calibers. And the photos that I saw about 4th of July and the beaches empty, and yeah, they were empty because the oil that I personally cleaned on June 20th completely smothered the beach on June 22nd. And what I'm not hearing at all, what I have not heard at all today, and I may have stepped out to the restroom with my sister, but are the health impacts on the people. My VOC levels are off the charts. I have been poisoned by core exit, which is dispersants used by BP to make the oil disappear. The oil is not gone. It is in our seafood, it is in our bodies. All these statistics that I've heard about how many people live so close to the water, that means that we are living it, we are breathing it, we are swimming in it. We are sick. And I'm not hearing any healthcare initiatives separate from whatever anyone's political views about Obamacare or whatever. I'm not talking about political issues. I am talking about a human issue. There are sick and injured residents. The commercial fishermen, the crabbers, the shrimpers, my friends that I've known my whole life. Some have died. Some are on life support. And doctors are directly linking it to this dispersant poisoning, but they do not know what to do about it. So I am begging you, I'm not asking, I am begging you to put this on your radar. This is life and death. It is life and death for dolphins, for pelicans, and for seahorses, and for people. I've been on the front lines for a very long time. Yes, it's about love. It's also about life. Thanks. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Hello. Good afternoon. I'm Manley Fuller with the president of the Florida Wildlife Federation. The key to restoration, I think we believe, is key to protecting our great nature-based economy. And as several people before have said, we've got to get the water right. We've got to get the land right. We've got to protect and restore watersheds throughout the Gulf, including Florida. We've collected a number of projects that different organizations have put together for Florida, potential restoration projects. And some of these are ecosystem restoration scale projects, such as the number proposed by the Nature Conservancy and by the gentleman who will speak after me, Mr. Jim Muller. We also have projects from the Northwest Florida Water Management District. The reason I want to lead with the Northwest Florida projects is that it's our understanding that the initial funding for restoration will come from monies that ultimately derive from the Deepwater Horizon disaster. But I do concur with the first speaker, public speaker, who said we've got to, first and the second public speakers, that we have to have long-term funding from the federal government. We have to have federal law. We have to have local government, federal government cooperation, because ecological restoration projects and Everglades restoration is a model that we ought to get to learn the best lessons from. That's a long-term commitment, and that's the same thing with the Gulf of Mexico. So we support the conservation lands projects, the ecosystem scale, but there's also critical local projects, such as some of the oyster restoration projects that are proposed both by the Water Management District, both by the local government here, and both by the Nature Conservancy. We'd like to see critical local projects and ecosystem scale projects be given consideration. And I don't know whether today is the appropriate time to give you what I've collected so far. You can I do that? Okay, and then I'd like to say that we're committed in working with our conservation colleagues and other people on we need to build something like the Everglades restoration efforts such as the Everglades Coalition. We need to have a golf coalition. I know there are a lot of elements of that in place already, but we do need to pull together on behalf of this world-class ecosystem. We need long-term scientific monitoring. I like the suggestion of the lady representing the commercial fishermen. Incorporate the fishing industry as much as you can into the ecological monitoring of the health of the Gulf, and then educational programs such as were described by the E.O. Wilson Center speaker earlier. So those are our comments, and I'd like to give you, for the record, the first of our what we've pulled together in terms of Gulf restoration projects. And there are a number of these that are Gulf-wide, from South Florida, the Everglades, the Keys, understanding that my understanding is your initial priority is going to be in the Panhandle region of Florida. And so the TNC proposals that deal with that region, such as the Flint Rock Project at St. Mark's Refuge, and the Tates Hill Restoration Project for the Northwest Florida Water Management District, and the Chico Bayou project here locally. Those are the kind, we'd like you to look at projects like that, because we think they can help benefit the overall ecosystem of the Gulf, as well as have local benefits. So thank you very much.
And Mr. Fuller, I'd invite you to attend our conservation workshops this afternoon and kind of lay those out more specifically for Chris Pease and our staff that will be working there.
I'm looking forward to that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Hello, my name is Zach Carter, and I'm a community organizer for South Bay Communities Alliance, right next door in Codian, Alabama. South Bay was founded just a few months after Katrina to advocate for equitable relief and in regard to Katrina rebuilding, and then subsequently has been very active in regard to fairer policies after the BP disaster. I wanted to specifically address your third point there, what new programs and actions, state, federal, and private, are needed. Actually, I wanted to address it in the form of a question. Dr. Samantha Joy, the oceanographer at the University of Georgia, just a couple of weeks ago, estimated that half of the oil is still in the Gulf. So my question to the task force is, what is your opinion on that? And then a follow-up is, what kind of consideration is given, what kind of, especially in regard to engineers, as to what could be done, to clean that oil up? I mean, for me, it's kind of hard to envision all of these good goals if half of the oil is still out there. And if it can't be pulled up, or if it causes more damage, whatever, then I think we need some real, public discourse and transparency in that regard. The other issue that I wanted to address is what key policy changes will improve the processes necessary to support restoration. I believe that there needs to be some real federal oversight, as well as some local citizen oversight in regard to some of these programs. For example, we have an op-ed that I co-authored with the president of our group that was recently published in the Mobile Press Register, and also subsequently in the Greene County Democrat, one of the largest African-American papers in the state. And what we wrote about was the fact that there was it's a very good program that's needed. It's the second year, where actually oysters are taken from the mother reef, if you will, right off of the shores of the city of Mobile, and transported 15 miles south to where they can purge themselves and later be harvested. Last year it went fine. There was 2 oyster barges that were utilized, so that the average oyster catcher, 18 to 25 foot skiff, could tong or dredge their oysters and leave it, put it into the barge. This year, arbitrarily, the barges were eliminated. Thus, oyster catchers were forced to make a 15-mile dangerous trek out in the open waters of Mobile Bay. Several of them were actually sunk. Luckily, nobody got hurt and nobody got injured. But I have a copy of this op-ed I'd like to give to Mr. Chair and have you all consider that as an example of why we need some more oversight, both on the level of the federal government and local folks. Actually, I got a petition signed by 200 of these oyster catchers asking for, some very basic relief just to make this program safe and equitable.
If you'd hand it to the young lady with the camera, I'll get it from her at the end of the session. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and task force members. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you here today. My name is Dave Robow. I'm with the Gulf Coast Energy Network. We're a nonprofit representing over 5,000 energy and sustainability professionals along the Gulf Coast from Houston, Texas to Tampa, Florida. I heard a lot of interesting things this morning. There was 3 specific things that resonated with me, so I wrote them down. I heard lean forward, proactive approach, and rare opportunity. And it reminded me of a pivotal point in our nation's history in the early 1940s, where the government took a multi-agency approach and invested over $2 billion and created 200,000 jobs to employ scientists, engineers, technologists, and mathematicians. Of course, their focus was on developing the first atomic bomb, but that same type of vigor and enthusiasm is what is needed now. The Manhattan Project was something that affected multi-agencies throughout the country, and as we look at the real reason why we're here today, which is not because there's oil in the Gulf of Mexico, if we employ root cause analysis, the real reason we're here is because of our nation's dependency on a finite resource that is unsustainable, meaning fossil fuels. So as we turn the corner and look towards new, renewable, sustainable sources of energy that we can control here domestically, I would employ the task force to look into what I like to call the Pensacola project, which would be a renewed interest in renewable energies and alternative fuels to focus on putting this nation on the path for a 21st century clean energy economy. For those of you that want to see what our vision looks like in the lobby, as you exit through Palafox Street, we have on display first of its kind, a 04 facility that would serve as an energy technology center and a green jobs incubator that would also focus on some of the externalities associated with the exploration, extraction, and refining of current fossil fuels. So look at the health impacts as well. So again, before I leave, I just wanted to let you know that we can lean forward and we can take a proactive approach and we can seize an opportunity that's before us to put our nation on a path towards clean, sustainable sources of energy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, thank you, Task Force, for letting us speak. My name is Shirley Pfister, and I am a resident here in Pensacola on Perdido Key. The key policy changes, I believe, that need to improve in order to support the restoration has to start at county level. Unfortunately, I've been the witness to a marina dredging over the past 2 months where the dredging material was used as topsoil and spread over a lot and then used for an activity, a wet and wild festival, to draw tourists to the area. This is soil that was dug from a 50-year-old marina. It was insufficient testing, and most of the doors were shut when I called to have it investigated. I eventually got it to the federal level, and it is being investigated now. I love this area. I do want it restored, but I do think it has to start in our own back door. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon. Thanks for the opportunity to talk. I'm Jim Muller with Muller & Associates. I just wanted to build on some of what Executive Director Wiley talked about the necessity to protect the natural communities that support our Gulf resources and then to restore them. We need to protect what's in good shape and existing so we don't step back, and we need to restore those that need help in order to give us additional environmental lift. And one example of this would be, a lot of people aren't really familiar with the St. Andrews Bay ecosystem. The species diversity in that system is equivalent to that in the Indian River Lagoon Bay, which many people hold up as like the halcyon of estuary diversity on the East Coast particularly. Along the panhandle of Florida, the most seagrass is in that bay, almost 10,000 acres. With about another 9,200 acres of salt marsh and almost 1,000 of acres of salt flat. The western part of this bay is called West Bay, and it has almost 30 miles of undeveloped coastline. For a Florida bay, that's basically unheard of, with another 40 miles that borders the creeks and tributaries that flow into that bay. It's essential fish habitat, according to NOAA, for more than 55 species. Then these are ones that the fisheries habitat for those that populate the Gulf. And almost 15,000 acres of it have already been protected through mitigation areas. And it would make a lot of sense to protect additional areas in there that could be then also be restored. It's got some very nice intact natural communities, but it also has some hydrological aspects of it that could be done. A lot of restorations going on in mitigation lands, and so in order to leverage what's already being done, some additional money that could be used to purchase the lands and then help for restoring. So I appreciate that consideration for the West Bay of the St. Andrew Bay system. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Janet Bowman, Director of Legislative Policy and Strategies with the Nature Conservancy. And a critical action that I would stress would be that there's really a fairly well-defined definition of what a healthy Gulf looks like and specific objectives for meeting that, so that when you're looking at individual projects and also you're looking at sort of subsequent losses from sources from overdevelopment and other causes, that you've got a target as far as an increase in value, resource value that you're achieving. And I think that's a lesson learned from the Ecosystem Restoration Task Force, is they have some very specific goals as far as water quality and water quantity. And those can change over time, but if you don't have that, you'll have individual projects that will result in individual improvements, but at the end of the day, you're not going to get the overall Gulf restoration. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes. Good afternoon. I'm Bill Jong, Award Chair of Humanities at Rob Moore University in Miami. I have two comments. First of all, I want to thank the task force for bringing these issues to light and this discussion format. I'm a communication specialist by training. I am very much involved in this BP oil spill, particularly from the communications perspective. When the spill came ashore, April the 20th, we know that date, I took a trip in early March to the other Gulf states, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and of course I was here in Pensacola and Panama City. And I was interested in speaking with the emergency management workers, the public information officers, the tourism people, particularly to understand the level of communication that they had, not only with the states, but with the federal agencies. And what I'm trying to say here is that I'm not suggesting a policy change, but what I'm simply saying is that as we begin to put together all these ideas, begin to think about how effective, how we're going to engage the communities that we're going to be trying to help. There should be a communication policy, that is a note on communication that is really as effective as possible. As you already know, we live in a digital age. We live in an age where people are communicating in several ways. Let's think about what is the best way to communicate with the people that we're trying to help across, I'm talking here about all the 5 states. And finally, I have a request to make. I am putting together, with the help of a lot of people here in Pensacola, Commissioner Robinson included, University of West Florida, October the 17th, just about a year and a half after the oil Gulf spill, we're having a conference here at the University of West Florida, bringing together all the 5 states, including Texas, Alabama, Mississippi, of course, Florida, trying to assess several things that were done right or done poorly. And we think there's going to be a good opportunity. The panel is almost complete. I need one area to be represented. Environment is not on that panel. So I have some cards here that I have my business cards. I would like someone from the environment. If you know anybody from the environment who would like to serve on the panel, October the 17th is going to be right here in the University of West Florida. And again, I will send you some details when I get back to Miami. But I think it's going to be a great addition to what we're discussing here. Again, all the 5 states will be represented. We'll have a similar format like this one, we have a lot of discussion as to what went wrong, particularly, well, what went right and what went wrong, particularly with respect to how the levels, by levels I mean the states, the federal government and BP, how those areas interacted and what we can learn from those lessons. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And our last speaker, yes.
Thank you. My name is Paul Thorpe. I'm with the Northwest Florida Water Management District. We are an agency that works to sustainably manage, protect, and restore water resources across the 16 counties of Northwest Florida. We have submitted 10 priorities for coastal and estuarine resource restoration and protection for your consideration. These include hydrologic restoration of coastal wetlands, notably in Tatesdale Swamp along Apalachicola Bay in Franklin County. Also the construction of urban stormwater retrofit facilities to improve water quality in Pensacola Bay, Choctawhatchee Bay, and St. Andrew Bay. Sediment removal for continued restoration of Bahia Chico here in Pensacola. And the acquisition of lands that are critical for water quality, public access, habitat, and for groundwater recharge across Northwest Florida. Additionally, we would propose to work with local governments to address continuing sedimentation from unpaved roads across the lower Choctawhatchee River watershed. Now, all of these proposed projects and priorities represent the continuation and realization of efforts that have been initiated previously under existing approved watershed plans. However, all of these specific activities proposed are currently unfunded. And again, we'll be submitting these in detail in writing, and thank you again for the opportunity to address you.
Thank you.
And we have one more speaker.
One more speaker.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. My name is Mike Sturdivant, and I'm the chairman of the local chapter of the Surfrider Foundation, the Emerald Coast chapter. We're a nonprofit group dedicated to the preservation of the world's beaches, oceans, and waves for the enjoyment of everyone. We have approximately 50,000 members in our organization. For starters, while we're here today to discuss the restoration, there's still thousands of pounds of oil buried on our beaches locally. And then offshore, the tar mats have yet to be mapped and discovered and removed. So I just want to keep in mind that we're very much still in the response stage locally. In addition to that, with all the tourists that were fortunately enjoying our beaches this past weekend, all the signage with regard to the health implications of this disaster have been removed. So there is nothing that's directing our tourists with regard to health impacts, and I think that needs to be rectified, perhaps not under this, but at some point. With regard to the goals of the group, I think they're pretty much right on. The protection of the environment and restoration, obviously, community resilience, very important to us, just with regard to the surfing community and the beach community. And obviously, I think human health should be featured in your goals, making sure that everything that you're doing contributes to promoting human health and doesn't do something to impair it. The Surfrider Foundation specifically opposes any proposal that might contribute to the environmental degradation of the beach or the nearshore environment. We oppose any dredge and fill or similar beach renourishment project. And we specifically oppose any construction of or maintenance of seawalls, piers, or other structures that might damage the environment and impede the natural processes of the beach. So I'm hopeful that you'll keep that in mind as you consider your projects. The critical actions or major outcomes certainly what you do ought to improve the protection of the environment, perhaps acquiring land for preservation. I think we should keep in mind the root cause of why we're here today, and that was an environmental disaster that was a result of risky behavior on the part of our government and corporations with the deep water drilling. So anything that we can do in your proposals that would also restrict or prohibit drilling off the coast of Florida in state and federal waters, anything that you can do in your projects that would support energy efficiency or would improve, say, public transportation, or even might improve public education about the importance of a healthy ecosystem, as was mentioned with regard to the E.O. Wilson Biophilia Center. These are really important long-term because I think, again, if we keep in mind what happened and why it is that we've all come to the room today about this disaster, really comes down to better stewardship of the environment and developing long-lasting ways to promote our economy that don't depend on fossil fuels. So, thank you.
Thank you. Apparently one
Hey,
more
just the last speaker. Everyone trying to get the last word here, but this is truly the last word, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you for coming. My name is Jackie Markell. I'm the president of South Walton Community Council in Walton County, Florida. And one thing that has been mentioned at many conferences and meetings I've been to is having a regional citizens advisory council. And I think when developing your plan, I believe Lisa Jackson has agreed to formulating this committee, but you guys are on the inside, I'm not. So I just want to make sure that that actually comes to fruition, because as a small citizens community organization, I would really like to see, as you develop your plans, that input from the community. Also, in Walton County, we are the home of coastal dune lakes. We've got 50 coastal dune lakes that are only found in a couple places in the world. And we are fortunate in Walton County to have these. So when I noticed when different features in Florida were mentioned today, the coastal dune lakes were not. And if you are not familiar with them, you'll be getting a packet from me soon to make sure that you understand about them. Because we did have oil intrusion in several of our lakes, and these are such unique bodies of water that when you're formulating your plans, don't forget about us. So let's see. Oh, and the other thing I wanted to mention, just as a person who came to the first meeting in November, today I noticed a marked shift in talk about economic issues, economic restoration. And I just want to make sure that we keep our eye on the goal, that the reason that we're doing this is to restore the ecology here. So I just want to make sure we don't forget about that. The economic restoration, of course, is important. We've all felt the results of it being jeopardized, but this is about the ecosystem, and I just want to make sure that you guys remember when all the suits arrive and the money starts getting passed out, that the projects that we do are focused on the Gulf Ecosystem Restoration Task Force goals. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would, and thank you very much, Brian, for hosting today. Brian does a great job facilitating meetings. He probably knows 3/4 of the people in the Gulf region personally. But I want to take a moment to thank Escambia County and Pensacola for once again being our hosts here. And Mimi, you really put on a great show on behalf of the state of Florida. All your panelists and Nick Wiley with the Fish and Wildlife Commission, I really wanted to thank all of you who came also. Many of you have been friends of mine for many years. It's almost old home week in some regards, but also many new friends that I've made during this process. So we have a lot to do, a lot of work ahead of us, but believe me, the input that we get from the folks down here in meetings like this is extremely important as the task force moves forward to develop its strategy. And as you heard today from Shannon Estenos and others, this is not a sprint, right, Julie? This is a long-term endeavor that we're laying the foundation for, and we help you. I'd like to ask the task force members if they have any concluding comments before we adjourn.
Yeah.
Rock?
Just I want to thank all the commenters as well as Mimi for the presentation she arranged. It was really good input. I wanted to align, at least myself, with the several sentiments about the importance of science. And one of the most important things we can do is develop a consensus of the science, particularly as Shannon Eshino said, as that informs some of the questions, our goals and our priorities, those kinds of things. And so I just, that's hard to do, but I think you can do it. I think they did it fairly well down in the Everglades, and I think that's an important aspect of what we're about. The other thing I would just say is that there's a tendency to focus on the new money, whether it's the NERDA money or other sort of new money that's out there, and everybody's saying we've got some good ideas here to prioritize. But I also don't want to forget all of us, all of our agencies are funded for things, and that I know we're trying very hard to align the stuff we're doing with the goals that have come out of this. So it's not necessarily new money, it's trying to be more responsive with the money and the programs that we already have. And so I don't want to lose that part of it. I particularly appreciate, I'll just mention, because I think they're important and they don't get the attention they deserve, is the comments on education and the comments on public health. I really appreciate the folks that kind of kept those issues on the table. So thanks.
Dr. Robinson?
I just want to make a couple of comments. One is I had heard several things that were worth taking notes on in this session, as I typically do at these sessions, and I just want to just point out one of those. And a week ago, this time, almost a week ago, I was speaking at the International Oil Spill Conference in Portland, Oregon, and in that at the session I spoke in, a plenary opening session, it was more about, okay, what would we be doing different? What have we learned? And one of those I alluded to was this idea of coordination within the federal government and external to the federal government. And one of the points I made, and I will continue to make, is that the Gulf is a national resource, if not an international resource, and to restore it is going to take the capabilities that our entire nation has to bring to bear on this problem. We need to bring forth the best science and policy that we have everywhere to make this work. However, I just so happen to firmly believe, being a faculty member of an institution in the Gulf, that a lot of that talent lies resident within the academic institutions in this region. And so one of the things I heard in this session is how important it is to engage the academic and NGO community in this region in our resolution or restoration of this national resource, not just from the impact of the spill, but from all the other things that we know have impacted this system over the years. And also want to really, as an educator and as a person who's focused a lot of his career on trying to engage the communities that have been typically underrepresented in this arena, I just want to echo that point as well, because as we talk about the changing demographics of this country, it's going to be very important that we engage every element of it to look for talent that might help us work through some of these very difficult issues. And that's going to be reflected in our engaging every element of our society, no matter where they have been traditionally, because the talent that we need might not be in those traditional places that we've often looked. So we need to be a bit more creative about that in the future. NOAA, as you know, in terms of the trustees for the oil spill, is the science agency. And one of the things that we've learned in our response actions last year is how important it is to engage within the federal family as well as the external scientific community. And we have sort of set the table for how we would do things to better engage those communities in the future. And Steve Morosky's presentation sort of alluded to some of the things we would probably do, or will likely be doing in the future differently as an agency to better engage a broader scientific community, to provide what you think, what you view as independent verification to help us all better, feel a bit better comfortable with what we talk about in terms of our findings as a federal agency.
Thank you, Nasia?
I wanted to just thank everyone for coming today, and more importantly for sharing your very important views. A lot of us are in Washington, but we're also down here in the Gulf. We've now been to a number of meetings, and we're going to continue doing that. Your views are critically important. We've heard a lot of really good information at this meeting, and we recognize that there is a lot of work to be done. It's complex. I'm glad to hear the focus on sound science. That's going to be important. There are going to be a lot of choices that we're going to have to make. I'm very glad to hear that it's not only the federal government, but that we have a real partnership with you, not only the academics and the scientists, but the people out there who are living the consequences of this oil spill every day. And it's good to hear that you too have ideas and you are informing us as we work toward a common strategy. So I came to the first meeting many months ago. I'm inspired by the additional thinking that we're all doing. And I want to assure you that all of the points that you raise, the information you provide, is being taken into account. And hopefully you will see good results. I like the marathon discussion because that's what it is. It's a marathon. And we'll need to be steady, and we'll need to be focused, and we'll need to keep at it so that we can accomplish the important goals of this task force. So thank you for coming. Thank you for sharing your views, and I look forward to continuing to work with you.
Leonard, anything from South 40?
Why not? From a USDA perspective, we are delighted to have had the opportunity to sit through this listening session and to be partners in this restoration effort. I can't help for reemphasizing how impressed I've been with the various things that have been discussed. There have been diverse comments and issues, but yet and still the commonality I see is a desire to work in a collaborative manner to address the restoration efforts. And that's promise, that's hope. And with that, we'll get the job done. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, thanks to everyone. Again, maybe extend our thanks to Governor Scott and to Secretary Vineyard for their efforts, and to your other DEP colleagues who've done such a wonderful job on this project that we got to see yesterday. And the conservation workshop will begin at 2 o'clock in the room that we started in, that we quickly outgrew this afternoon. I think we could fit back in there now, but if you want to talk more about some of the conservation initiatives, I will certainly be there. That'll begin at 2, and the first person to produce me a cheeseburger between now and then will get a special project award. But I'd like to call this phase of the meeting closed. And one last thing, the environmental justice roundtable's in the mezzanine room, which is upstairs as well, and I assume they will begin shortly. Thank you. Thanks to all of you for joining us.